Brian Costello, the New York Jets beat writer for the New York Post. I know you've been thinking about this game all week long, Brian, because it's a lot to unpack. It's one of those trees with a bunch of branches. So let's start. Which branch do we start with first, Brian, when this talks about the Jets and Bills tonight? How do we start? What are we looking at first when it comes to the Jets?
Well, obviously the coach, Kirk, right? I mean, it feels like I was watching the Bears and Jaguars yesterday in London and going, "Oh man, I remember when the Jets played there." What was that? A year ago? Oh, it was a week ago. We were
Yeah.
in London at the stadium. It feels like we've lived a season since that game. So yeah, I mean, the obvious one is Jeff Ulbrich making his coaching debut tonight as the interim head coach, as well as Todd Downing taking over the play calling, which to me is probably more significant football wise. Obviously Ulbrich's going to put his stamp on the team. He's got to lead the team. But in terms of like actually changing the results of what's been happening, I want to see what Downing can do with this offense, and can he get the running game going, number one, and can he get Aaron Rodgers looking more like Aaron Rodgers than he's looked the past few weeks?
One of the things is you mentioned it. I don't know, what is the culture of the Jets now? Because when you have Robert Saleh, who's been there as the head coach over the last 3-4 seasons, he's establishing a culture. Now he's fired, but yet the culture, does it stay the same? Is it change? Does the identity change? What does Jeff Ulbrich now bring to this team that they weren't doing in the first couple of weeks of the season?
Yeah, I think the culture doesn't change really that quickly, because I think it's what Saleh established, and I don't think you can do that midstream really. So to me, it's not about the culture right now. It's really just about the football. And I think, maybe over time the culture will change, but I don't think you're going to see that right away. I think they're going to stick to what they had. And really, Ulbrich, was brought here by Saleh. He's kind of, a solid disciple. So I don't really think this is going to be a drastic change in terms of that. I think what the drastic change is going to be is they're looking for things on the football field, especially offensively.
What have we seen from Aaron Rodgers, whether at practice, in his media sessions, anything? He's saying the right things, Brian, but what do we expect from Aaron Rodgers now that one of his trusted confidants and Nathaniel Hackett is no longer giving him the plays in his ear? What do we expect from Aaron Rodgers, and what Todd Downing may bring, or something different from what Nathaniel Hackett brought?
Yeah, I don't think Rodgers can really make a stink because of how bad the offense has looked, right? So it's hard to really say, oh, no, you got to keep Nathaniel Hackett. It's been terrible the last couple of weeks and really hasn't been great all season. So I think Rodgers knows they have to try something. How long he's going to have patience if it doesn't work, that's another question. I think, he's going to want to see results pretty quickly here. They've got to get the running game going. The running game has been non-existent. Last week they ran 14 times and they had 57 dropbacks. That is not a recipe to win in the NFL with any quarterback, but especially when your quarterback's 40 years old and your offensive line hasn't really been blocking that well to protect him. So teams are blitzing them now. The Broncos and Vikings really brought the blitz heavy. I'm curious to see if the Bills do that this week. So, we'll see. I think the key to this game for the Jets and the key going forward is, can they establish the run? We expected big things from Breece Hall this season, and it hasn't really developed.
Brian Costello, New York Jets beat writer for the New York Post, joining the Rich Eisen Show. Kirk Morrison here, filling in for Rich. I mean, they've got backs. It's not like they can't utilize them all. Whether it's Braylon Allen, you mentioned already Breece Hall. Like, why hasn't there been a commitment to the run game? Because this offensive line hasn't blocked well. I've seen Aaron Rodgers on the ground far more in a short period of time with the Jets than I see probably his entire career with the Green Bay Packers. Why not lean on the running game a lot more instead of putting this 40-year-old quarterback back? I mean, dropping back as many times as he has this season.
Yeah, well, I mean, it hasn't looked good when they have run, so I think that's part of it. They just haven't. If you watch the games back, it's almost every play someone's making a mistake. This guy misses a block. This guy misses a block. It gets blown up in the backfield. So I think that's scaring them a little bit. They clearly, last week was ridiculous. The 14-57 ratio was crazy. They did fall behind 17-0 in that game, but I always laugh when coaches are like, "Oh, we had to throw because we were behind." I mean, it's the second quarter. You can still run the ball and get things going. So, we didn't get a lot of answers about that game, honestly, Kirk, because of all the coaching changes. So, like,
Right.
the two main decision makers from that game were both out of their jobs by Tuesday. So, we didn't get a lot of answers for that one. But I do think the running game has looked so bad, it's been hard to stay committed to it. And I know Rodgers has a lot of control at the line of scrimmage, too. I don't know how much he's checking into passes versus runs. you never like, they give him like 3 plays and he gets to pick at the line of scrimmage. So is he checking out of the runs a lot? I'm not sure, but I think with Todd Downing, you saw what he did in Tennessee. Obviously, he had Derrick Henry there, which you're nuts if you don't run with Derrick Henry. So he ran a lot with in Tennessee. I do think that's going to be what they're trying to establish now going forward with Ulbrich and Downing. So I do think you're going to see a greater commitment to the run than you have seen the last few weeks.
Brian, I know it's the difficult job that you have to do, especially with this New York media, when you only get maybe 1 or 2 questions, right? When you're talking with everybody there and you're trying to get answers, and there's way more questions that need to be presented, because with the expectations that were put on the New York Jets this season, what they did this offseason, what they've done in the draft, the guys they've acquired, for this team right now to be sitting here with only 2 wins right now?
Yeah, 2 and 3.
It could be 2 and 4 by the end of the night. Like, is this a total failure? Who is really to blame for this? Because we've talked Saleh, we've talked Aaron Rodgers, we've talked obviously offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
What does Joe Douglas play in this? Because I feel like he's the guy that no one talks about, but maybe the architect of how this team has been built.
So, Kirk, you mentioned the New York media, and I've been doing this for a while in New York, and I always have a theory called the bullseye theory, right?
Okay, I'm
always a bullseye. There's always a bullseye on someone on the team,
right?
Right? There's always someone who's the target for the fans and the media. Sometimes it's the quarterback.
Yep.
Right. Zach Wilson took a lot of slings and arrows the last few years.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the offensive coordinator. Nate Hackett is now going to be the last time the Jets had an offensive coordinator last until his 3rd season was 2011. Wow. So it's been a while. They go through them quick. Okay. Sometimes it's the head coach, and Saleh's now gone. And then sometimes it's the GM, and the GM sort of skates a little bit, during the season, because a lot of the focus is on the coach and the quarterback. So I do think if this keeps going south, there's going to be a lot of focus on Joe Douglas. But you heard Woody Johnson the other day. What did he say? This is the best roster I've had in 25 years as a head coach. But he thinks Joe Douglas did a good job. He thinks the coaches are screwing it up. So, now they have to fix it. I will say this, 2 and 3, I've covered a lot of bad seasons with the Jets. There are teams that pull out of 2 and 3 and still have a good season and make the playoffs and go somewhere. Like for years and years in this division, it felt like the New England Patriots always started 2 and 2, 3 and 2, somewhere in that age. And everyone was like, oh boy, this is it. They're falling off. And then it was on to Cincinnati or whatever, and they would rattle off 10 games in a row. I don't think the Jets are that caliber of team, but I don't think 2 and 3 is the end of the world. And they win tonight, they're in 1st place. So it's pretty crazy. And, I don't think there's anyone in the AFC. The Chiefs are the Chiefs. They're winning somehow, even though they're not playing their best. But everybody else in the AFC is kind of bunched together to me, and I don't see anyone pulling away in this conference right now.
So, Brian, no one's talking about the defense as well. This is one of the best defenses last season in the NFL. This year, kind of been up and down a little bit. This hasn't been the defense that has given this offense the more opportunities and chances to win football games. Where have they been lacking at defensively?
I think they're lacking in plays that kind of win you a football game, like turnovers and scoring. Like, it's hard to say a defense has to score,
right? But
defense, like when the offense is struggling, they could use a pick six. They could use a fumble return for a touchdown. Quincy Williams gets a fumble in London, and Sam Darnold sort of like touches him and he fell down. That would have been a huge play if he could have returned it. They only have 2 interceptions all season, and those are both by Brandon Eccles, who I'm going to guess for your casual fans are not. They don't know who Brandon Eccles is. Right. Sauce Gardner doesn't have an interception in 2 years. He's a great player, but he's got to start taking the ball away. He had one hit him in the chest in the end zone last week that he dropped. DJ Reed is having a great season. He's not taking the ball away. The next step for this defense is to take the ball away, set the offense up with scoring position or to score themselves. And then I think they can be an elite defense. They're still a good defense. They've gotten hit in the running game. Week 1 against the 49ers, they really ran the ball on them. A few other times they've looked weak against the run, but they've been strong against the pass. And now potentially there's news today with Haason Reddick hiring Drew Rosenhaus as his agent. Maybe they're going to get Haason Reddick at some point, and that would definitely boost this defense. Yeah,
that was my next question, Brian. That news this morning that came out, Adam Schefter reports that Haason Reddick has hired Drew Rosenhaus as his agent after he fired his previous agents last week from CAA. His agents fired
him.
They fired him. That's right. They fired him. Like, we're not doing this. CAA holds a different, look when it comes to how we handle negotiations. But this has been a failure from the beginning. I don't know how the situation kind of comes to a resolution. You can help me out here, Brian, because he was traded to the Jets, expected a contract extension, never got the extension, never showed up. I mean, trust me, if I'm about to make this amount of money, Brian, at least I'm going to hold in. I'm going to show up.
Yeah,
I'm going to have a little hamstring. I'm going to have a calf injury.
All August.
Yeah, I'm going to be there. But for him to not show up, and the Jets have held their stance, I don't know how they come to a resolution for him to allow him back into the locker room. They got to make a play on this one. I'm looking at what's going on in Detroit with obviously Aiden Hutchinson, who's now injured, won't be able to play for the rest of the regular season. Are the Jets fielding trade offers, or even is there a market for Haason Reddick?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a market for him, honestly, with what he's forced his way out of Philadelphia. Now he hasn't shown up for the Jets. You're going to have to give, if you did a trade now, you'd have to give him a long-term contract. I'm not sure anyone's doing that. With Rosenhaus coming on, I think that's renewed hope that he does show up for the Jets. Drew Rosenhaus would not have taken him on as a client if he didn't think he was going to be able to get a deal done. Drew's too smart. He's too good of an agent. He wouldn't have done it because this will be embarrassing for him if he takes him on and doesn't get something done. So Drew must have had conversations behind the scenes with the Jets, with Reddick, that he knows he can get something done. So I didn't think anything was going to happen for last week, but now with Rosenhaus coming on, I think that's renewed encouragement that the Jets can get him in there and get something done. And as far as I don't think the players care, Kirk. You know this. I mean, players look at it and go, "It's his business. I'm not touching. I'm not talking about other people's money."
Right.
I think he's been a guy because he was never there. This was weird. Like they've never known him as a teammate, so it wasn't like the guy was missing. I think they're going to look at him as like a midseason acquisition. Like, all right, this guy can come in and help us. Great. Come on down. So I don't think there'll be any weird feelings with that.
No, that's a great point. Like, just like it was just a regular normal trade. Like when somebody trades for Amari Cooper in the next couple of weeks, he's like, new teammate coming on in. Brian Costello, New York Jets beat writer. One more for you before I let you go. I know this is the last game of Week 6, but is this a must-win game for the New York Jets? Do they have to win this game? They slide to 2-4. I know you mentioned it earlier that they could still climb out of this 2-4, but for team morale, for I think the outlook for the rest of the season, so much riding on one game. I almost feel like this is a must win for the Jets.
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as must win, but I do think it's a very, very important game. And like what you just said, morale. Like if they win this game, I think they're going to be feeling really good. They're obviously going to be good in the standings. They're tied with the Bills, but they have the tiebreaker, so they'll technically be in first place. After all the changes of last week, they'll feel really good about Jeff Ulbrich. They'll have some momentum, because they go to Pittsburgh next week on Sunday Night Football. So this doesn't get easier for them. So I do think winning this won't be huge.
The storylines, the drama, they never end. Like you say, it carries from one week, and then we'll see them again in prime time the following week. But I know someone who's going to cover it all. Is Brian Costello. He'll be doing that, man. Brian, I appreciate the time, my man. We'll be checking all your stuff out today as you watch the game and as we get a chance to sit back and watch it all play out in front of us as well.
All right, Kirk. Thanks for having me.
That's Brian Costello, the New York Jets beat writer for the New York Post, right here on The Rich Eisen Show.
Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku Channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.